There are individuals in your life right now wearing masks so polished, so expertly crafted, that you don't even realize you're in the presence of a hidden threat. They don't shout their intentions or strike you with open malice. Instead, they smile. They show up when you need someone. They speak softly, offering comfort laced with quiet corrosion. Their charm is calculated, their kindness a tool, their concern just convincing enough to make you lower your guard. Carl Jung didn't just analyze the surface of the psyche, he illuminated the shadows people desperately try to keep buried. He exposed a chilling truth, that danger rarely arrives with fangs bared. Often, it enters your life as a friend. It nods in agreement, listens without judgment, then slowly, silently starts to unweave you from within. These people don't raise their voices or throw punches. They erode your confidence with subtle doubt, mirror your weaknesses to gain your trust, and disarm you with empathy that's nothing more than a strategy. The real enemy often looks like an ally, someone who never raises suspicion but gradually infects your sense of safety. They dismantle your boundaries with compliments. They study your wounds, not to heal them, but to use them. And while they smile, while they say all the right things, they are busy constructing a trap made of trust. This is the horror Jung tried to unveil, the betrayal that comes not from hate, but from the cold, deliberate mimicry of love. Jung understood that most people are not living as who they truly are, they're performing. They wear carefully chosen identities, not out of malice, but out of fear, strategy, and survival. Rather than reveal their raw, unfiltered selves, they project versions designed to be palatable, versions they believe will charm, impress, or disarm you. And if you're not vigilant, if your eyes aren't trained to see beneath the polished exterior, you'll find yourself emotionally invested in a facade. You'll give your loyalty, your time, even your heart, to someone who never intended to meet you with honesty. Jung revealed a disturbing insight, that behind the soft voice, behind the curated vulnerability and pleasant behavior, can exist a force that is quietly feeding on your openness. He decoded 6 psychological disguises, crafty, insidious roles people adopt not by accident, but by design. These masks aren't always obvious. In fact, they're engineered to seem kind, humble, or even harmless. But left unchallenged, they begin to distort your perception, drain your spirit, and blur the line between affection and control. You think you're dealing with sincerity, but what you're really facing is a performance so convincing, it makes you doubt your own instincts. And that's where the real danger begins, when manipulation hides behind good intentions and you no longer know who's safe. The first mask is the eternal victim, an identity crafted not from mere hardship, but from a deep refusal to own one's role in the chaos they create. This person never admits fault. Every downfall, every failed relationship, every moment of conflict is pinned on someone else. They don't just tell you they've been hurt, they build a whole personality around it. In the beginning, it feels noble to care. You feel drawn to their pain, convinced that your presence might be the turning point they need. You interpret their suffering as a call for healing. But Carl Jung saw through this illusion. He recognized that some people wear their pain like armor, not because they want healing, but because they want immunity. As long as they are the wounded one, they're above critique. No one dares question the person who has been through too much. But look closer, and you'll see the game. They've learned to weaponize their misfortune. Their brokenness becomes currency, an emotional ransom they subtly use to keep you in place. And when you begin to withdraw, when you try to reclaim your space or simply breathe without guilt, they flip the narrative. Suddenly, you're the cold one. You breathe betrayer. Why? Because they've merged with their shadow self, the wounded persona that justifies manipulation under the disguise of suffering. They don't seek freedom from their pain. They seek power through it. And if you're not careful, you'll start apologizing for your peace. You'll shrink your joy, your voice, even your presence, just to avoid triggering their endless narrative of despair. This isn't love. It's psychological entrapment masquerading as vulnerability. Next comes the mirror, the person who doesn't truly exist as themselves, but rather as a flawless echo of you. They become your favorite song, your deepest fear, your private ambition, mirrored back at you with eerie precision. They laugh at your jokes a little too quickly, finish your sentences with uncanny accuracy, and seem to always agree with your worldview. At first, it feels like serendipity, like you've met someone who finally gets you. But it's not synchronicity, it's strategy. What you're feeling isn't connection, it's choreography. Every move is rehearsed, every compliment calculated. Carl Jung warned about this exact illusion. When someone becomes a persona so completely, they vanish into their performance. They don't live from the soul, they survive through imitation. Behind their charm is a vacuum, a hollowness where authenticity should be. And that emptiness is dangerous because it hides itself in flattery. It feels good to be mirrored, to feel seen. But you're not being seen, you're being studied. They mold themselves into your ideal, not to bond, but to be adored. And the moment your admiration dims, their entire act crumbles. Suddenly, they pull away, grow distant, or turn resentful. You wonder what changed, but the truth is, nothing ever was. They were never showing up as themselves. You were in love with a projection, and projections don't bleed, don't stay, don't fight for truth. The comfort you felt wasn't intimacy, it was illusion. And when you stop clapping for the performance, the performer disappears. Because it wasn't love. It was a mirror, flashing back your image until it no longer served them. Then enters the silent enabler, the one who never openly resists you, but whose presence quietly undermines your power. They don't shout, argue, or forbid. Instead, they whisper subtle suggestions wrapped in concern. That's ambitious, just don't want you getting your hopes up. On the surface, it sounds like care. But underneath that soft tone lies a current of quiet sabotage. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow that wears the mask of the helper, the people who disguise control as caution, who claim they're protecting you when really, they're limiting you. Their words don't crush your dreams, they puncture them slowly, until your confidence leaks out unnoticed. These are not the ones who challenge your vision with open hostility. They dim it gently, with a smile, by reminding you of risks, by forecasting failure dressed as realism. Why? Because your growth terrifies them. Because if you expand, you may leave them behind. And their unspoken fear of abandonment dresses itself up as practical advice. They don't say, don't do it. They say, be careful, but repeat it until you start questioning yourself. Their strategy is not to control your choices, it's to erode your certainty. They don't break your wings. They simply remind you how high the sky is, until you decide not to fly. If you're unaware, their fear becomes your compass. Their caution becomes your gospel. And over time, you begin to mistake their limitation for your intuition. This isn't support, it's disguised resistance. It's the quiet art of shrinking someone while holding their hand. And unless you wake up to it, you'll end up building a smaller life just to keep their comfort intact. The secret competitor is perhaps the most insidious of all, the one who wears the grin of camaraderie while quietly keeping score. They stand beside you like an ally, but every interaction is a silent comparison. Their support is conditional, their praise calculated. They'll clap for your achievements, but only if those achievements don't threaten their self-image. The moment your light begins to cast a shadow on theirs, something subtle shifts. Their tone gets tighter, their compliments hollow out. Suddenly, your wins are lucky, your talent is timing, your growth is unsustainable. They don't attack directly, they dilute. They downplay. They pivot the spotlight with casual brilliance, a louder story, a sharper anecdote, a quick redirection that leaves your moment dimmer than it should be. Carl Jung explored how envy can wear the face of friendship, how the ego masks inadequacy with subtle competition. These people aren't malicious in the traditional sense, they're tormented by the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. Your evolution doesn't offend them, it exposes them. Every time you step into your power, you awaken their inner critic. And so they try to mute your shine, not out of cruelty, but out of defense. They fear irrelevance. They crave validation but resent that you're earning it. And if you stumble, they won't gloat out loud, but you'll feel the quiet satisfaction radiating from their silence. Their concern arrives cloaked in hindsight. "I had a feeling this might happen," spoken as if they knew better all along. You won't find open hostility here. You'll find disguised rivalry, just enough closeness to confuse you, just enough competition to drain you. They don't root against you outright, they root for a version of you that stays beneath them. And unless you're awake, you'll confuse their proximity for loyalty, not realizing they're watching not to support you, but to measure whether you've finally surpassed them. The spiritual narcissist is a master of disguise, arguably the hardest to spot because their manipulation is cloaked in serenity. They don't yell, they don't gossip, they don't explode. Instead, they float. They speak in soft tones, referencing sacred texts, universal truths, ancient wisdom. At first, it feels like you've found a guide, someone who truly understands the soul. But their calm is not compassion, it's a mask designed to maintain power. Their version of peace is sterile, conditional. You're allowed to feel, but only within the boundaries they approve of. The moment your emotions become inconvenient, you're labeled. "That sounds unhealed," they'll say, not with concern, but with condescension. They don't validate your struggle, they intellectualize it, dissect it, and subtly shame you for having it at all. Carl Jung spoke of this inner fragmentation, a personality split between a public image of light and a private addiction to control. These individuals haven't mastered themselves, they've simply learned to silence their chaos in socially acceptable language. They call it growth, but it's performance. They reject conflict not out of maturity, but because conflict threatens their throne. They won't meet you in your mess, they'll rise above it and look down. They won't argue, they'll diagnose. And every time you try to share your truth, it gets filtered through their lens of superiority. They're not here to walk with you, they're here to stay above you. Their entire identity depends on being the most healed in the room, and that means your growth is a threat, not a victory. The more enlightened they claim to be, the less space you have to simply be human. You're not allowed to be raw, vulnerable, or even uncertain, because your questions disrupt their illusion of having all the answers. And as you keep reaching for their validation, you'll realize it's never coming. Not because you're not growing, but because their power depends on your self-doubt. They don't want a peer, they want a disciple. They don't want to empower you, they want to be worshipped in silence. Finally, there's the empathic controller, the one who seems like a safe haven, a soul who listens intently, feels everything you feel, and mirrors your pain with almost eerie precision. They cry with you, speak gently, and make you believe you've finally found someone who truly understands. In the beginning, it feels sacred, like you've connected on a level most people can't reach. But as time passes, the warmth turns into something suffocating. You start to monitor your tone, filter your words, dim your joy, and suppress your pain, not because they asked, but because their reactions punish your honesty. Their emotional sensitivity is not a bridge, it's a leash. You begin to sense that their comfort always comes before your truth. And slowly, without realizing it, you start abandoning your voice just to avoid triggering their storms. They don't yell. They don't demand. They ache. They wilt. They withdraw. And somehow, you're always to blame. Carl Jung warned that some people, unable to deal with their own unhealed trauma, will project it onto others and expect the world to adjust around their wounds. This is not empathy, it's emotional colonization. It's the silent expectation that you become their emotional caretaker. If you fail to read their moods, you're cold. If you assert your needs, you're selfish. If you set a boundary, you're the destroyer of peace. They never needed understanding, they needed dominance disguised as fragility. What makes this mask so dangerous is that it preys on your compassion. It makes you second-guess your intuition. You start to wonder if you're too harsh, too distant, not loving enough. But what you're really doing is eroding your identity for the sake of someone who refuses to grow. Their pain becomes your prison. Their wounds dictate your behavior. You think you're being kind, but you're being conditioned. You're not supporting, they're siphoning. And the more you try to soothe them, the more unstable they become, because they never wanted healing. They wanted control through emotional gravity. They call it depth, but it's manipulation. They call it connection, but it's dependence. They break, not to become whole, but to make you feel responsible for putting them back together. And the longer you stay, the more you forget who you were before the guilt settled in. You begin to wear their pain like armor, mistaking your exhaustion for devotion. But Jung's wisdom was clear: when someone makes their emotions your responsibility, it's no longer love, it's bondage. And if you don't choose yourself, they will drain you until there's nothing left to save. Walk away, not because you don't care, but because they don't. They care more about being felt than being fair. And in their storm of feelings, your peace is the first casualty. Why do these people exist in every corner of our lives? Why do we encounter them in families, relationships, workplaces, even within ourselves? Carl Jung's answer was unsettling in its honesty. These personalities are not random. They are the inevitable byproduct of a life lived without introspection. These individuals never turned inward. They never confronted their manipulations, never questioned the control they crave, never made peace with the pain they buried decades ago. So it leaks out, through charm, through silence, through victimhood. Not because they consciously intend harm, but because the unconscious, left unchecked, refuses to stay hidden. It seeks expression in whatever form it can find, even if that means using others as emotional dumping grounds. These people don't steal your peace out of pure evil. They do it because they've built an entire identity around not facing who they really are. They feed on your energy not because they wake up with malicious intent, but because they don't know how to sustain themselves without it. Their entire emotional survival is outsourced onto you. And if you don't become conscious of it, you won't just be drained, you'll feel responsible for the draining. You'll call it compassion. You'll call it love. You'll believe you were chosen because you're special. But the truth is harder. You weren't chosen. You were available. You were open. You were unguarded in the exact way they needed you to be. Jung's greatest warning wasn't about them, it was about you. Because you don't keep meeting these people by coincidence. You meet them because something unhealed in you allows it. You don't attract pain, you make room for it. You make excuses for it. You rationalize it until it fits a narrative you can live with. And in doing so, you mistake tolerance for strength, endurance for love, and self-abandonment for sacrifice. If you always find yourself fixing broken people, maybe it's because you were never taught how to feel worthy unless someone needed you. If you're surrounded by smooth talkers, maybe you're still waiting for the validation no one gave you as a child. If liars and manipulators orbit your life like gravity, maybe deep down, you still haven't claimed the right to your truth. The shadow doesn't just belong to them, it lives in you too. This isn't just about protecting yourself from toxic people. It's about exposing the parts of you that invite them in and let them stay. It's not enough to spot the mask, you have to ask why you ignored it. You have to wonder why the performance felt familiar. Why you chose comfort over truth. Because in the end, these patterns don't end when you block a number or walk away. They end when you finally face the part of your soul that was afraid to be alone, afraid to disappoint, afraid to set a boundary and stand by it. Healing doesn't happen by removing what's toxic. It happens when you stop being available to it. Until you face your own shadow, you'll keep dancing with theirs. The shadow holds the keys to everything you've locked away deep inside, the anger you never dared to express, the instincts you learned to ignore, the boundaries you quietly abandoned, and the self-worth you sacrificed to fit in. You silence those vital parts of yourself to become the good person, the helpful one, the agreeable one, the one who never caused waves. But in silencing your own voice, you lost the very tools that guard your spirit and protect your peace. When you deny your rightful anger, you make space for others to trample on your dignity. When you turn away from your gut instincts, you miss the warning signs flashing right before you. When you shrink your power down to fit someone else's comfort, you allow yourself to be consumed, often under the guise of love or loyalty. Jung never urged you to become cold or ruthless. What he demanded was far deeper: to become whole. To stop pretending that your love is an endless resource without boundaries. To stop extending trust like currency to those who have never truly earned it. Because many people aren't growing or healing, they're just getting better at hiding the same toxic cycles behind polished words and new masks. And if you keep choosing surface-level peace over the messy, honest work of inner alignment, you'll keep handing over pieces of yourself to those who would never, in return, offer you genuine respect or care. So where do you go from here? It starts with a brutal audit of your inner circle. Who drains your energy without remorse? Who leaves you tangled in confusion and self-doubt? Who forces you to over-explain your worth just to be seen? If someone constantly needs elaborate context just to treat you with basic decency, they aren't confused, they're dodging accountability. Give yourself permission to let them go. Quietly. Without carrying the heavy burden of guilt. Let your shadow rise up in full force. Stop chasing after an impossible ideal of being perfect. Speak your truth unapologetically. Say no firmly. Own your anger as a sign of self-respect, not as a flaw. Your shadow isn't your enemy, it's your backbone. The inner strength that refuses to bow when others try to make you kneel. Stop justifying yourself. Those who truly deserve you won't demand explanations or proof. They'll respect your limits without the need for negotiation or argument. But the toxic ones, they will always ask for more reasons, more apologies, more concessions. Let them remain baffled. Their confusion is a reflection of their own unwillingness to face reality. Jung taught us that consciousness is not about persuading the world to see your truth, it's about refusing to abandon your own soul in the struggle to be accepted. And above all, trust that subtle voice inside you. That first flicker of unease. That brief hesitation in your gut when something didn't feel right. That wasn't paranoia or anxiety. It was truth trying to break free, trying to warn you before the damage deepened. The world around us is filled with masks, false faces worn to conceal pain, fear, and brokenness. But now, you've peeled back 6 of the most common illusions. Not to live in fear of others, but to reclaim your power. To stop sacrificing your essence in the name of peace that costs you your freedom. Once you recognize the pattern, you no longer need to dance to its rhythm. Once you hear the silence behind the words, you can walk away before it turns into noise that deafens your soul. And once you fully reclaim your own shadow, embracing every hidden, rejected part, you will finally stop allowing others to use theirs as a weapon to keep you small, silent, and unseen.